Where Two Worlds Touch, A Spiritual Journey Through Alzheimer's Disease by Jade Angelica, narrated by Sheryl Hartman. Awakening. Oblivion was my first companion on the Alzheimer's journey. I simply wasn't there to witness the beginning of Mom's decline. We were separated geographically by 1,200 miles. I lived in Maine, and Mom lived in Iowa. Complicated circumstances in both our lives had prevented us from seeing each other for a few years. When we spoke on the phone, I didn't register any decline. I had always attributed oddities in Mom's memory, speech, or mood to drinking. 25 years earlier, I had begun separating emotionally from Mom. Before this, we had been very close, perhaps too close. As a child, I was her shadow, trying desperately to win her attention and approval. As a young adult, I had trouble identifying my own opinions, preferences, and needs, particularly if they seemed contrary to hers. In order to become my own person, I needed both geographic and emotional distance. I also needed to protect myself from Mom's alcoholic lifestyle, judgmental nature, and limited worldview, which didn't allow me to choose sobriety or my own religious beliefs, to express vegetarian dietary preferences, or to speak my truth about what it was like for me growing up in an alcoholic, abusive home. Alcohol was the centerpiece of our family life and social gatherings, and my relationship with Mom became especially strained when I stopped drinking. After Mom moved to the nursing home, and I moved to Iowa to be her advocate, companion, and comforter, a relative criticized me for not spending more time with Mom during the years before Alzheimer's when she could have appreciated my presence. Although this criticism was hurtful to me, I realized that there was much this relative didn't understand about me, my family, my relationship with Mom, or my healing journey. Mom might have appreciated more visits from me during the years of separation, but possibly not. I was such a disappointment to her. When I was in Iowa for my 25th high school reunion, the local paper wrote about my book on the moral emergency of child sexual abuse. Although neither book nor article revealed my personal history of abuse, Mom was shamed and threatened by what she perceived as public exposure. After reading the article in the morning paper, she flew into an alcohol-fueled rage. Her critical rants, echoing off the walls of her small house, accumulated with the pronouncement, "I am not proud of you." I was devastated. By this time in my life, I'd overcome my addictions to alcohol and drugs and had been sober for over 15 years. I'd graduated from Harvard Divinity School. I was an ordained minister, albeit not in Mom's religious tradition. I was doing a meaningful ministry on behalf of abused children and had published books and articles in the hopes of protecting them. I received professional recognition and achieved a modest amount of financial security. By social standards, I had achieved some success. Although I had tried to please Mom by making deliberate and specific efforts to connect with her, in Mom's eyes and heart, I was a disappointment. If modern theologian Richard Rohr is accurate in his belief about the spiritual journey that we have to leave home in order to actually find our way home, it was precisely those years of geographic and emotional separation that allowed me to come home to Mom during her time of greatest need. My sibling had placed Mom in a nursing home and moved 1,500 miles away, so no one remained in Iowa to care for Mom. In my mind and heart, being abandoned and alone in a nursing home in the midst of diminishment from Alzheimer's disease was not an acceptable way for my mother to live the last years of her life. I don't know if Mom ever did feel proud of me. However, her whole-souled smiles, her hugs and kisses, and her expressive sounds and admiring looks during the 3.5 years we had together told me that she definitely appreciated my presence as her daily companion in the nursing home. In 2002, when I learned from a cousin who saw Mom occasionally that signs of Alzheimer's were definitely present, avoidance became my next companion on the journey. Not denial, which is common for Alzheimer's family members, but avoidance. I knew Alzheimer's was among us. I knew because Alzheimer's had been a cloud over our family for nearly 30 years. Both of Mom's older sisters had some form of dementia, probably Alzheimer's. I still vividly remember the day in 1973 when dear Aunt Maggie wandered off during a family picnic in the small river town of Guttenberg, Iowa. She'd gone to the restroom and never returned. In my photo collection, there's a picture of her on that day, wearing my royal blue volleyball jacket and a bewildered smile. That was the beginning for our family, and now Maggie's daughter was telling me that Mom was showing signs of this disease. She encouraged me to read books about Alzheimer's, to watch videos and movies, and to explore the Alzheimer's Association website. I politely listened to her while consciously disguising my impatience, thanked her, and chose to avoid the entire subject. Fear, of course, was the foundation of my avoidance. David Shank, a journalist who researched Alzheimer's disease and wrote The Forgetting, Alzheimer's, Portrait of an Epidemic, was also an avoider once. He helped me feel forgiven for my avoidance and explained why this is a common reaction. Opening the book one fears is tantamount to looking straight into the face of Alzheimer's, and perhaps to one's own dark future. So we avoid it. We don't read the books, we don't ask the questions, we don't visit our newly diagnosed neighbor. It's only natural to not want to explore such awful thoughts. Because Shank and I have traveled through the valley of Alzheimer's avoidance, we wouldn't dare to judge others who are also following this path. Avoidance was an effective companion for me. Until 2003. Maggie's daughter made the thoughtful and gracious offer to bring Mom to Maine to visit me. Her offer was accompanied by the foreboding, before it's too late. And so I agreed. Mom was thrilled, as demonstrated by her packed suitcase ready and waiting by the door for 2 weeks before the trip. I was apprehensive. To prepare myself for this visit from my mother and what I considered to be my first face-to-face meeting with Alzheimer's, I attended a personal growth workshop, one of many such experiences I sought during my 20-plus years of healing. Influenced by the Episcopal priest Alan Jones to believe that the journey of our souls often presents itself in the form of a story, I was especially intrigued when the workshop leader suggested that we could learn about our unconscious drives and longings by writing our life stories on one page. I did this creative writing assignment eagerly and was impressed by my own poetic conciseness and my understanding of my life. Over dinner the night before Mom arrived, I told a friend about the workshop. Convinced that my one-page life story was well written and accurate, I read it to my friend with pride. It was a story of being vulnerable, as a child and as a woman, of being abused, abandoned, and betrayed by the very people who were entrusted with my care and safety. My friend looked at me in astonishment over the dinner table. Expecting praise, I was shocked by her reply. "You've done so much with your life, Jade. Why do you keep telling that story?" The wisdom of my soul instantly knew the answer to her question. Because almost every part of my being, including my imagination, had been severely wounded by abusers in my childhood and my adult intimate relationships. Part of me had healed, and other parts were continuing to heal. But my friend's question made me realize that I had closed down my imagination and shut myself off from seeing any new possibilities in my life story. Fortunately, this conversation opened my eyes and raised my awareness of this pattern just in time. A new possibility, in the form of my mother in decline from Alzheimer's disease, was about to step off a plane at the Portland airport and awaken my soul to an unimagined future. Mom and her traveling companion, Maggie's daughter, arrived for a 3-day visit in May. It's a breathtakingly beautiful time of year along Maine's southern coast. But Mom seemed to only have eyes for me. When she walked off the plane and caught sight of me, her face erupted into joy that radiated throughout her entire visit. She took my hand to the airport, and she didn't let go. The changes in Mom were poignant, touching my heart in unexpected ways. One surprising change was that her judgmental nature seemed to be replaced by a kind of sweetness. It seemed that she had forgotten what a disappointment I had previously been to her. She called me her girl, smiled genuinely at me, and reached out to connect with me physically whenever possible. Mom seemed curious about herself and her environment. There was a full-length mirror in the hallway of my apartment, and every time she passed the mirror, she paused at length to examine her reflection and comb her hair. Almost every picture from that trip shows Mom holding her comb in one hand. When I served our first lunch together, she was more interested in the silverware than the food. She picked up her fork and looked closely at the handle. She turned it over, stroked it, and touched it to her cheek. In order to turn her attention away from the fork, I had to suggest she taste her food. Not until much later did I realize the source of her fork fascination. When I first moved out on my own, Mom had given me this silver-plated flatware. It had belonged to her mother. This silverware engraved with the initial T, the first letter of Mom's maiden name, was familiar from childhood. Unquestionably, some kind of recognition was happening for her. Mom's surprising behaviors opened my heart and riveted my attention. I wanted to connect with her, to be supportive and caring, but it was clear that I didn't know what to do or how to be in her presence. I didn't know how to communicate with this transforming being, how to meet her needs, how to keep her safe, or how to navigate social practices such as dinner in a restaurant or attending a concert with someone who no longer understood or practiced conventional behaviors. One evening at a concert of a group of local a cappella singers, I had a flashback to a movie experience with my nephew when he was 5. After fidgeting for a while, Mom started talking out loud. Shh, didn't help. Finally, Mom stood up, just as my nephew had, and shouted, just as my nephew had, "This is taking too long!" It was time to go. My mom with Alzheimer's equaled a mystery to me, and the growing collection of things I didn't know resulted in me feeling inadequate and afraid. My brief encounter with Mom during this phase of her disease opened my eyes and my heart to the helplessness that often overwhelms both persons with Alzheimer's and their caregivers. None of us knows what's happening, but whatever it is, we're not in control, and we don't know what to do about any of it. During our time in Maine, Mom and I were unconsciously planting the seeds for a new bond that would grow between us. Reading a letter that Mom wrote after returning to Iowa, it seemed as if my deepest desire to be noticed and loved by her was being fulfilled. "I'm more lonesome for you since visiting you," she wrote, "because you were especially nice to me. I never realized how caring you were." It was as if my mother were seeing me for the first time. Over the next several months, we talked on the phone and wrote to each other regularly. I began to notice that my efforts to connect with Mom, which had previously been mostly obligatory and dreaded, were now expressed with enthusiasm and tenderness. The damage to Mom's rational thinking somehow freed her to engage and communicate with me differently. Our phone interactions were uncomplicated, yet deeply sincere. We talked about day-to-day activities. She was playing cribbage, walking the dog, feeding the birds, and planting flowers. I was learning to cook, walking alone by the ocean, and studying spiritual direction. A most significant change was that Mom listened to what I was saying. She really listened, without changing the subject in the middle of my sentences, as she had throughout my life. As we talked and wrote about our plans to get together again, Mom even offered creative solutions for meeting my complicated health needs regarding traveling instead of criticizing me as she had in the past. This highlighted how much she wanted to be with me. Every precious interaction encouraged me, opened my heart further, and nourished our relationship. Mom's letters, written on the teeniest stationery I had ever seen, smaller than an index card, were simple and sweet. Using few words, she encouraged my endeavors and communicated honestly about her feelings. She was thrilled that I was studying spiritual direction. She probably didn't know what this was exactly, but she knew it was about getting closer to God. I'm all for that, she wrote repeatedly. She asked me how to teach her how to concentrate when she prayed and how to deepen her relationship with God. She even expressed interest in my writing and asked me to send my articles to her. She had never done this. She apologized for making mistakes in her handwriting and sometimes wrote the same letter twice, copying it over to edit the mistakes and then sending both copies. Her awareness of her failing abilities and her efforts to send a nicely written letter touched me deeply. It seemed that Mom was building a home in my soul. In her letters, she repeatedly thanked me for gifts I had sent, and I felt so grateful for her desire to appreciate me. She offered to send me money for rent, probably recalling my financial troubles after my engagement had ended 3 years earlier. Although I didn't need the money at this time, her thoughtful effort to take care of me woke me up, and I began recognizing more and more of Mom's thoughtful efforts. Having grown up on a farm, she loved plants and was a gifted gardener. She searched her seed books and found a special flower called Jade Eyes. She'd order the bulbs from a catalog, and when they arrived, she sent me the 2 biggest, presumably the hardiest, she said, to plant in my landlord's yard. She also planted 2 bulbs in her yard, so we would have twins. The gorgeous blooms, puffs of tiny white flowers with very tiny jade green centers, came up in the spring in our yards in Maine and Iowa. Reaching across the miles that separated us, these blooms created a symbolic sense of connectedness. Then Mom had a car accident and lost her driver's license. She was studying so hard and taking and retaking the driver's test to get her license back. She wrote about this in every letter. The final failure, the doctor's statement that she was not competent to drive, was so painful for her. The compassion I felt for Mom's lost sense of freedom moved me to tears. It was the thorny threshold of her transformation from independence to dependence. She was beginning to understand that dependent people must often wait for their needs to be met, if they are met at all. She cried because she couldn't go to the grocery store when she wanted to. I cried too, wishing I was there to take her. As Mom's letters arrived less frequently, our phone conversations awakened concerns within me for her welfare. For example, learning that she was taking Alzheimer's medication and still drinking heavily caused some worry. But I didn't realize exactly how dangerous this was because I had consistently and successfully avoided learning anything specific about Alzheimer's. A year later, when I accompanied Mom to doctor's appointments, I became enlightened about the potential perils of alcohol use by dementia patients. A year after Mom's visit, I was startled awake in the night by a frightening dream about her failing health. I was sure something serious had happened to her. When I called her in the morning, my sibling told me a story that resurrected my panicked memories of that day in 1973 when Aunt Maggie had wandered away from the family picnic. My sibling had taken Mom camping in Minnesota. Mom had gone to use the restroom and departed the campground with intention. She wasn't wandering aimlessly, as one might expect. State troopers found her walking on an interstate highway, and she told them that she was going home to Dubuque. The next stop had been to the hospital emergency room, where Mom was given antipsychotic drugs to calm her out-of-control emotions. The hospital report documents the anger and despair of a frightened, confused, and extremely vulnerable person. Learning from this experience, my sibling realized that taking Mom on camping trips wasn't such a good idea. Since there was a similar trip planned later in the summer, I was asked to stay with Mom for those 2 weeks. Eager to spend time with her, I enthusiastically said, "Yes, of course I'll come." Then my sibling said that Mom had become uncooperative, describing her as angry and her behavior as volatile and combative. According to my sibling, Mom had no appetite and refused her medication as well as her meals. My sibling coached me to be stern if I wanted Mom to obey, suggesting that I raise my voice, threaten to take her to the mental hospital, or give her the antipsychotic medication prescribed by her doctor. Alarmingly, my sibling added that after Mom took the meds to calm down, she was kind of out of it for a few weeks. My enthusiasm drained away, and I was terrified. What had I said yes to? In my heart, I knew there had to be a better way to care for my vulnerable mother that didn't involve yelling, threatening, or giving medication that isn't even recommended for use by people with dementia. There had to be a better way, and my desire to find it catapulted me out of avoidance. Intellectually and emotionally unprepared and terrified by the mystery before me, I was nonetheless about to take my first steps on the journey through Alzheimer's.